It sinks south across Scotland, pushing into the central belt and southern Scotland by midnight, as well as Northern Ireland and then eventually northern England. It clears from the north of Scotland as the night goes on, with blustery showers turning up here and that strong wind continuing. And a breezy night for all, staying dry with clear spells in the south, but with the breeze. Temperatures holding up here at 8 Celsius. The front then stalls across central parts of the UK for Tuesday. Cold air to the north of it, mild air to the south. So a bright but fine start to the day for much of the Midlands, East Anglia, the southeast, some sunshine in places. Wales and the southwest cloudier with some spots of rain and drizzle first thing. And for Scotland, Northern Ireland mostly bright with some heavy showers and snow over the hills along with a gusty breeze. Feeling cold in the far north, milder further south, and in between for Northern England, for North Wales, thicker cloud here and outbreaks of rain on and off through the day, turning heavier for a time later into Tuesday night and the start of Wednesday, especially over the likes of Cumbria as well as Snowdonia. Again, that front stalls as we go into the start of Wednesday, but eventually it sinks south. It clears to brighter skies for Thursday and Friday, but with colder air sinking south.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Liam Halligan. Join me every weekday at 1 p.m. for On the Money, your daily dose of economics, business and consumer news. I got 25 years experience covering economics and finance. We hold grown-up discussions with a host of experts who really know their stuff. You can't buy gas and store it. That was a mistake, wasn't it?
I think it was a mistake.
Even you, Liam, don't have a crystal ball.
Inflation's a real threat.
Every weekday at 1, you're On the Money.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome once again to On the Money, your daily weekday dose of economics, business and consumer news. I'm Liam Halligan, and for the next hour, we'll be talking about the cost of living crisis, what else, and asking if subsidies to green energy companies funded by your household energy bills should be suspended or even scrapped. Plus, we discuss those controversial comments by TV property doyen Kirsty Allsop on first-time buyers. As ever, on the money. Grown-up discussions with people who really know their stuff. After the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon. It is 1 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. Now, our gun salute is underway in the Tower of London, where the Honourable Artillery Company is marking the 70th anniversary of the Queen's accession to the throne. This is part of the 61 gun salute. Queen Elizabeth is the first British monarch to celebrate a platinum jubilee. She was just 25 when she became Queen on the 6th of February in 1952, 70 years ago today. Well, a gun salute was also held at 12 o'clock in Green Park. All of the celebrations will culminate this year with a 4-day UK bank holiday weekend from Thursday the 2nd to Sunday the 5th of June. The Prime Minister has refused to comment on whether a delay to the publication of a plan to deal with the backlog in the NHS of hospital patient waiting lists is due to a rift with the Chancellor. Earlier, the Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, rejected reports it had been put on hold because the Treasury's refused to sign it off, saying it will be published shortly. Boris Johnson said the government was united and praised Rishi Sunak's handling of the economy.
What we're doing is working together across the whole of government to fix the COVID backlogs, which, believe me, is a massive priority for us, for everybody in the country. And,
no doubt about the Chancellor's
absolutely not. And what I would say is that it's thanks to the investment that we're able to put in, thanks to the sound management of the economy, everything that we did, if you think about it, all the looking after business throughout the pandemic, that's enabled our economy to bounce back.
The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, said, "We've got 6 million people on the waiting list. We desperately need a plan."
The longer this takes, the greater will be the waiting lists. And we've had people on waiting lists, not only during COVID, but before COVID, we had waiting lists that were far too high. So the government saying we need more time is not going to cut very much ice with those that are on the waiting list. You know, there's a price to be paid by a government that is distracted by all these allegations that are going on. And that price is being paid by the 6 million people who are waiting for their operations.
Well, the Health Secretary today has said that some of the recent criticism of the Prime Minister's wife, Carrie Johnson, was sexist, undignified and unfair. His statement follows publication of extracts from Lord Ashcroft's new book, which accuses Mrs Johnson of influencing her husband's decision-making. Carrie Johnson has insisted she plays no role in government and has been targeted by enemies of the Prime Minister in a brutal briefing campaign. Well, speaking on GB News, think tank CEO Polly Mackenzie says the claims were a distraction from the real issues.
This, in my view, is a concerted effort to essentially protect Boris Johnson by saying it's all her fault. It's a mad woman in the attic narrative. And it is being used to try and insulate him from his own choices and his own bad behaviour. If he cannot police the boundary between her and his professional life, then he doesn't deserve high office.
The Criminal Cases Review Commission is to examine fresh evidence in the case of mother and daughter Lynn and Megan Russell, who were murdered in Kent 26 years ago. It follows the revelation notorious serial killer Levi Belfield has confessed to their murders. Our Home and Security editor Mark White has more.
He is one of the UK's most notorious serial killers. A former nightclub bouncer, Levi Belfield, is serving a whole life sentence for the murders of schoolgirl Millie Dowler, Marcia McDonnell and French student Amélie Delagrange. The revelation he has now confessed to the murders of mother and daughter Lynn and Megan Russell is a startling new development in that 26-year-old crime. Paul Bacon, the lawyer representing the man convicted of those killings, revealed he had now received a signed confession from Belfield. Paul Bacon's client, Michael Stone, has always maintained his innocence, but multiple appeals have been repeatedly rejected. Belfield is said to have revealed new information that could only have been known by the man who attacked Lynn Russell and her daughters in this quiet country lane in Kent. The new evidence will now be examined by the Criminal Cases Review Commission. Mark White, GB News.
Australia will fully reopen its borders to all vaccinated visa holders from a fortnight's time. It's going to be the first time in nearly 2 years since March 2020 that people can travel to Australia from anywhere in the world as long as they've had the jabs. You're up to date here now on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head to On the Money and Liam.
And coming up on The Money today, household fuel bills are soaring, yet still a big chunk of what we pay goes towards subsidising renewable energy companies. As bills spiral, should ordinary households be paying for the transition to net zero? Millions of low-income workers are facing a perfect storm of higher tax, fuel and food bills. That's according to the Trade Unions Congress, as the cost of living crisis mounts. Meanwhile, location star Kirsty Allsop claims young people can afford to buy a home if only they gave up Netflix subscriptions, gym memberships and foreign holidays. Really? Today we're asking if Kirsty has a point, or if this daughter of a baron is just hopelessly out of touch with the real world. And as ever, I want your questions, opinions, suggestions. What do you think of the issues raised in today's On the Money? Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @gbnews. We'll read out some of your messages later in the show, so stay with us. It's 7 minutes past 1 on GB News, television and radio. I'm Liam Halligan, and you're On the Money. Now, when On the Money launched back in September, we warned that the UK faced a winter of discontent. Britain is at a turning point, we said, not dissimilar to the late 1970s. We're heading for high inflation and a cost of living crisis and industrial unrest. That's what we said 5 months ago. Now, over 40 years ago, when I was a kid, winter of discontent newspaper headlines captured a sense of national dismay and outrage. Inflation was soaring, with government debt spiralling upward. Rubbish went uncollected in the streets, and increasingly stroppy trade unions exerted power, with society becoming more fractious. Well, the cost of living is now once again soaring, convulsing politics, just as it did 40-odd years ago. While the Consumer Price Index suggests prices are up 5.4% on last year, the broader Retail Price Index shows inflation already at 7.5%. And for millions of less well-off households spending a higher share of their income on necessities like food and fuel, inflation is surely well into double digits already. Well, last week, after regulator Ofgem raised the energy price cap by 54%, Rishi Sunak unveiled a support package. The Chancellor told the Commons the schemes involves a council tax rebate and complex loan schemes to help households cope with average annual fuel bills of almost £2,000. Now Sunak is warning prices will rise even more in the autumn as wholesale gas prices remain elevated. Well, calls for a fundamental rethink of how we generate, obtain, store and charge for energy are getting ever louder. 10% of this latest rise in the energy price cap, and therefore in our household bills, goes towards the cost of energy companies going bust, says the regulator Ofgem. That's pretty astonishing. And between 15 and 25% of our energy bills is channeled towards subsidies for firms and landowners involved in providing renewable energy, including onshore and offshore wind farms. Again, to me, that doesn't quite sound right. Yes, we do need gradually to wean ourselves off fossil fuels like oil and gas. But the UK's determination to do that faster than almost any other major economy means households are now paying more for fuel than, in my view, they should be. Why should the costs of transitioning to renewables be added to fuel bills, given that poor and struggling families, especially now, spend a much higher share of their money on fuel? And that's our On the Money question today. Should we scrap green subsidies to cut household fuel bills? Now, if you still don't think there's a cost of living crisis for millions of households in the UK, well, Tesco boss John Allen has just warned the worst is yet to come when it comes to rising food prices. And research by the TUC, the Trades Union Congress, suggests another 1.3 million workers have begun claiming universal credit since the coronavirus pandemic began. That indicates that increasing numbers of people who are at work are having to rely on benefits to make ends meet. The TUC says low-income workers face what they call a perfect storm this spring, pointing to potential industrial unrest, even strike action, as the cost of living crisis bites. Now, on the money, we do grown-up discussions with people who really know their stuff. And we're focused on fuel bills today. And I'm delighted to welcome Natasha Fielding. She's head of European natural gas at Argos Media, the renowned commodity price intelligence company. Great to have you with us, Natasha. Helen Barnard returns to On the Money. She's deputy director at the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, one of the UK's leading anti-poverty agencies. Good to see you again, Helen. And of course, another Helen on the Blonde Money CEO, friend of the show, Helen Thomas. Great to have you with us here in the studio. Natasha, let's go to you first. If you can just give us a sense of where wholesale gas prices are and where they may be heading. What Argos does, Argos Media, you guys really specialise in following commodity markets around the world. You're renowned for doing that. So what's the really big picture here that's driving these high energy prices, that's convulsing our politics?
Hi, great to be on the show. So we first saw wholesale gas prices really rise around the autumn of last year, and they've really skyrocketed since then and been at record high levels. There's a combination of factors that have influenced this, but one of the biggest ones was that underground gas storage levels were extremely low at the beginning of the winter. So normally by around October, people will have stocked up ahead of the winter in underground gas storage sites, and they will withdraw that gas in the following winter. But those storage levels were the lowest they'd been in a decade by the start of the winter, largely following a cold and long heating season the year before. If you remember, around January time, it was very cold, and it stayed cold throughout April and May. So at a time when normally Europe would have enough spare gas to start injecting gas into those storage sites, it was still withdrawing the gas. So that was one of the big factors behind the price rises more recently.
That's a really good summary, Natasha. Thanks for that. Helen Barnard, moving on to you. The clever folk at Argos Media, they tell us all about wholesale gas prices, these global factors, but there are specific UK factors, aren't there, that make our household fuel bills higher than in many other countries. We've had a lack of natural gas storage here in the UK, and at the sharp end, consumers are also paying for those renewable subsidies. Now, whatever you think about the move to renewable, I personally think it needs to happen, by the way. Is it right that poorer households should be paying more on their fuel bills to help facilitate this move to renewable? Or should those renewable subsidies be suspended at a time when prices are so high that many millions of families are struggling?
I mean, what I think should happen is they should be shifted onto general taxation, because they are paying for public goods, and they should be done through the most progressive tool we have, which is tax. And it does seem very strange that we are using something like energy bills to pay for these things, which they're not designed to be fair, effective mechanisms to pay for public goods. They're designed to pay for your heating and your lights. So personally, I think actually suspending it will be difficult, because as I understand it, a lot of that money is actually tied up in existing contracts. So it might not be possible, even if you wanted to pull it. But also, as you've said, one of the reasons we're in this position is because we are too dependent on these other sources of fuel. So we do need to keep moving. There are things also like energy efficiency. We've done very badly at getting our homes to be energy efficient. And so things like that would help reduce our exposure to this, building up gas storage. But fundamentally, energy bills are the wrong way to try and pay for something which we as a nation want to do. It's also, by the way, the wrong way to try and get help to people with their energy bills. You know, we seem to be now expecting energy companies to somehow become a branch of social security, which is just bizarre. Let's let them be energy companies and use our other tools to help people with the impacts of that.
There's some really interesting politics going on here. There you've got the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, you know, incredibly influential, highly regarded, anti-poverty campaign, the kind of organisation you'd think would be very much on board with renewable subsidies and all this nice, cuddly green stuff. And there you've got their deputy director saying this should be moved to general taxation. We're not doing this correctly.
Well, I think that the point here is that we're focusing on those specifics of these higher prices and what's driving the high prices, and therefore what can we do about it. And there's kind of two things clashing here, because there's your energy policy and then there's your general well-being of your population.
Yeah.
And I think that is, clearly what has been addressed there by what Helen is saying, which is, what are you trying to achieve, first of all, by having the subsidy, and then what are you trying to do if you are trying to help out at a really difficult period? And everything's got very confused and very mixed up, and actually that's politically even more toxic. People can understand they need to pay for things. They do get that. And they are, by and large, are willing to pay for a world they want.
Yeah.
But you've got to get the buy-in. You've got to, and not everyone's on board with the renewables, or not everyone's on board with the concept that we must be more secure in our energy supplies. And everyone has different approaches to that energy policy. But for now, this is just becoming a message. Your brilliant starter piece there. We're getting hit by so many things at once, and it's just exposing the confusion at the heart of this, which is that, frankly, right now, as I've been on here many times to tell you, growth is lower than would otherwise be the case. Prices are going to be higher. That is really difficult. So how do you manage it as a government? How do you prioritise? And at the moment, frankly, it looks a mess.
And the Bank of England now, having told, inflation alarmists like me that inflation is going to be transitory, they're now saying openly, as they issued their inflation report last week, we're going to see a real terms cut in living standards of 2% on average this year. So that's not just that your incomes won't go up, it's that inflation will eclipse any rise you have in income on average, so your real living standards will fall. That's really going to impact politics, right?
Oh, massively, of course. The fact of, what everybody wants is a growing economy, and they can, achieve more and spend more and grow with it. And we're getting none of that, and we're not going to have any of that for, several years, if not a decade to come.
Thank you for now, Helen Thomas. Stay with us because my guests are returning after the break. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. We're going to keep discussing this issue. Should renewable energy subsidies be scrapped in order to lower household fuel bills, or at least suspended while household fuel bills are so high? This is a very, very important subject. Your emails are flooding in thick and fast. We'll read out some of those shortly. Stay with us. You're On the Money.
Hello again. Following a bright start to the day, it is now turning cloudier from the west, and that cloud will bring rain in some western and northwestern parts during the rest of the day. It will also turn increasingly windy in the far north and northwest, where persistent and at times heavy rain will affect the far north. Now, for much of Scotland, Northern Ireland, Western England and Wales, it's a cloudy afternoon with the cloud covering the hills, and it's going to be damp, especially over hills and coasts, with mostly light rain and drizzle. But further east, well, it stays bright, albeit increasingly cloudy. 8 Celsius in the east of England, I think 12 or 13 across western parts of the UK. And overnight, the rain turns heavy as it sinks south across Scotland, pushing into the central belt and southern Scotland by midnight, as well as Northern Ireland and then eventually northern England. It clears from the north of Scotland as the night goes on, with blustery showers turning up here and that strong wind continuing. And a breezy night for all, staying dry with clear spells in the south, but with the breeze. Temperatures holding up here at 8 Celsius. The front then stalls across central parts of the UK for Tuesday. Cold air to the north of it, mild air to the south. So a bright but fine start to the day for much of the Midlands, East Anglia, the southeast, some sunshine in places. Wales and the southwest cloudier with some spots of rain and drizzle first thing. And for Scotland, Northern Ireland, mostly bright with some heavy showers and snow over the hills along with a gusty breeze. Feeling cold in the far north, milder further south, and in between for Northern England, for North Wales, a thicker cloud here and outbreaks of rain on and off through the day, turning heavier for a time later into Tuesday night and the start of Wednesday, especially over the likes of Cumbria as well as at Snowdonia. Again, that front stalls as we go into the start of Wednesday, but eventually it sinks south. It clears to brighter skies for Thursday and Friday, but with colder air sinking south.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 22 minutes past 1. You're on the money with me, Liam Halligan, on GB TV and GB DAB Plus Radio. This subject, you're really getting into this. Lots and lots of tweets and emails coming in because we're talking about not just the cost of living crisis and whether we're in the midst of a 1970s-style whisper of discontent. We're focusing in particular on energy bills and whether the renewable subsidies that we pay as part of our energy bills should be suspended or even scrapped at this time of sky-high prices. I'm still with my expert panel. Natasha Fielding of Argos Media. You guys are commodity price specialists. You're world-renowned analysts in this field. Great to have you on the show. What's the word on where wholesale gas prices are going? Because in the end, that's what drives the Ofgem energy price cap that then drives household fuel bills. We know the price cap is going to be adjusted in 6 months' time, possibly 3 months' time, Ofgem are now saying. So where are wholesale gas prices, Natasha, just in the round, and where do you think they're going?
So wholesale gas prices have fallen off somewhat over the past month. They have remained at record highs if you compare it to this time last year or really any time in the past. But they have fallen off somewhat. And where they will end up around the spring and summertime will largely depend on the developments in the weather. So if we were to get a late cold snap, that would likely send prices soaring again. And it will also depend on things like how windy it is, because that will affect how much gas is burnt by the power sector. But at the moment, if we look at where forward prices are, a contract for delivery in the second quarter of this year was trading at the end of last week at about 200 pence per therm, and prices at their peak in December were at 450 pence per therm on one day, above that level. So if you look at it in that context, prices have fallen off somewhat, but that is still an extremely high level compared with previous years.
Beautifully explained. Well done. Good for you, Natasha. So prices have eased a bit in recent weeks and months, but they're still significantly higher than this time last year. Helen Barnard, let's come back to you. You're with the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, a distinguished anti-poverty campaigning group. Just fill us in about the extent of fuel stress at the moment, particularly among lower income and struggling households. Your response to the increase late last week in this Ofgem energy price cap that impacts household bills, a 54% increase.
Yeah, I mean, even before that, we saw it's around 4 million low-income households were already behind with their bills, were already getting into debt, and many of them were also having to cut back on essentials. So people are literally skipping meals. They are not turning the heating on when it's very cold. There was one story we were hearing about a woman who was asking her neighbours for duvets to try and keep warm. Another person talked about her 6-year-old had a torch by the bed because she didn't want to have to turn the lights on at night to go to the toilet because she knew they needed to save money. So these are things, no 6-year-old should have to think about these things, but that's what's happening. And that was all before this massive price hike. So people are now facing £600, £700 additional bill. And of course, many of them lost about £1,000 a year last autumn when the Chancellor cut universal credit. So there are people who are already in this kind of impossible situation, and they are going to see this year that pressure pile on and on and on. And they are going to have to go without. I mean, there is no way out of it. People will get into more debt. They will cut back on essentials. They will end up iller, both mentally and physically, because of this. And they'll end up with debt that has to be paid back, even when the pressure eases.
Helen Thomas, as somebody that's worked not just in financial markets, but also at the top of British politics, used to work for George Osborne, who, of course, became our Chancellor. Do you think there will be a recalibration in Downing Street now when it comes to these green subsidies that are put on household fuel bills? When wholesale prices were low, we didn't notice that a big chunk of our fuel bills, 15, 20, 25%, was going to subsidise the renewable energy industry. Now you've got the likes of Helen Barnard of the Joseph Rowntree Foundation saying, get rid of those subsidies on household fuel bills. If we are going to subsidise the move to renewable, put it on general taxation because that's fairer and more progressive.
Well, of course, Rishi Sunak is already tinkering around with tax. I mean, yes, national insurance rather than income tax, but we all tend to think of it as pretty much the same thing.
We've got those price rises in April
as well. And you'd like to think that, government can be very flexible. We saw, God, how many budgets did Rishi stand up and do in those first 18 months? About 6 of them or something. So we know they can act quickly when they want to. But of course, he's absolutely petrified about this massive pile of debt. And with interest rates going up and with inflation going up, that's even more of a headache, because then we start spending more on just servicing that.
But the renewable subsidies that we pay on our household fuel bills, they don't go to pay off the national debt. They go to often big energy companies that are making lots of money from oil and gas while pivoting to renewables.
Well, this is where, and I think, that, Helen's point is important about where and how you pay for this. What I'm trying to get at is that, of course, as the Chancellor, you have to sit and think about it in the round. Now, would like to think that they would be focusing in number 11 on this. But, of course, as we know, they're rather consumed by the classic psychodrama that consumes the Conservative Party from time to time. So, hopefully, when they get the moment to actually think about the economy and what they want to do, and when they're not arguing about NHS waiting lists or anything else, they will look at this, because it's a really thorny, important issue. And as we're hearing, affects people right here, right now.
Exactly. And I personally think this is going to be a huge issue. Pressure is going to mount on the Chancellor, on the Prime Minister, to at least suspend these green...
It will, but who will be the Chancellor and the Prime Minister?
Oh...
That's the question.
That's good. Thank you to all my guests. Natasha Fielding of Argos Media. Well done, Natasha, for appearing Look forward to having you on the show again. Beautifully explain the complex issue of forward markets and gas prices. You don't get that on other shows. Helen Barnard of the Joseph Ramsey Foundation. Thank you, Helen. And, of course, the other Helen, our regular panellist, Mrs. Blonde Money herself, Helen Thomas. Now, continuing with the cost of living issue, Tesco boss John Allen has, as I said, warned that the worst is yet to come when it comes to food price rises. Now, GB News reporter Paul Hawkins has been testing the mood outside a Tesco branch in Surrey. Paul, if folk in leafy Surrey are concerned about the cost of living crisis, it must be serious.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, when he says, when he speaks, rather, then, you know, we need to pay attention because Tesco, Liam, is the country's biggest private sector employer. 300,000 people work for Tesco, and it's also the UK's biggest supermarket chain. So when the chairman, John Allen, says that the worst is yet to come, and he says that food inflation could hit 5%, it's currently 2.7%, could hit 5% by the spring, you've got to stand up and listen. Look, he says that the supermarket chain, himself personally, of course, they're concerned about the situation with regards to the big squeeze on household incomes, particularly those that are worse off. But there's only so much that the sector can absorb. Tesco and the other big supermarkets, they run on profit margins of around about 3%. The German supermarkets, Lidl and Aldi, run about 2%. So there's only so much they can afford before eventually they will have to pass on those energy costs, those supply chain costs to us when we're in the supermarket. So, yeah, really difficult time for us when we're shopping, but also a difficult time for the supermarkets too.
Seeing the beginning of a bit of a dance here, Paul, where Tesco are saying to the government, well, if you want us to keep food prices on an even keel so you don't get the political heat, how about scrapping that increase in national insurance contributions for employers that's coming in April?
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Liam. It's easy to remember. I mean, we've often, when we talk about national insurance rises, we think about the effect on the individual and on the employee. It's also another cost for business. It's another headache for business, in addition to the energy costs, in addition to the supply chain costs, in addition to the transportation costs. So costs going up for individuals, costs also going up for businesses, and there will be more pressure on the government. You were just talking there about pressure on the government to scrap the subsidies when it comes to that part of the fuel bill that we all have to pay when we're at home. When it comes to, you know, funding sustainable energy, there's also and you can expect more pressure on the government to do a U-turn when it comes to national insurance rises between now and the start of April.
Nicely done, Paul. Pop inside Tesco and get yourself a bit of lunch. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan, coming up after TV star Kirsty Allsop tells first-time buyers to give up Netflix and lattes so they can afford a new home. We're asking, does she have a point? Plus, today's Money Talks guest will be telling us about the crisis manufacturers face with those rising energy costs. But first, the GB News headlines. It's Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it's 1:33. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. The Prime Minister says Number 10 and the Treasury are working together in harmony to tackle the NHS backlog of hospital patient waiting lists in England. That comes after the Health Secretary rejected reports that publication of the plans had been delayed due to the Treasury refusing to sign them off. Well, Sajid Javid says that the plans will be published shortly. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says with 6 million people, though, on the waiting list, we desperately need a plan. Almost 300,000 people have been unable to see a cancer specialist within 2 weeks of an urgent referral between April and November last year. The analysis was commissioned by the Labour Party. It shows that it's the highest number of breaches in the 11 years since the introduction of the 2-week target. The Department of Health and Social Care says the pandemic has caused NHS waiting lists to grow, but that now most cancer services are back to or above pre-pandemic levels. The Health Secretary also says some recent criticism of the Prime Minister's wife, Carrie Johnson, was sexist, undignified and unfair. His statement follows publication of extracts from Lord Ashcroft's new book, which accuses Mrs Johnson of influencing her husband's decision-making. Carrie Johnson has insisted she plays no role in government and has been targeted instead by enemies of the Prime Minister in a brutal briefing campaign. The The Children's Commissioner says there's still a long way to go on children's mental health, with only a third of young people currently able to access treatment. Dame Rachel D'Souza says some children are waiting too long to start treatment, and there are real regional disparities on waiting lists. A new 50p coin to mark the Queen's Platinum Jubilee is being released at post offices today. Around 1.3 million of them are being made available on limited release. You are now up to date here on GB News, but on your TV, online and DAB Plus radio. Stay tuned for On the Money.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 1:37 on GB News, television and DAB Plus radio. You're on the money with me, Liam Halligan. Now, of course young people can afford a home. Just move somewhere cheaper. Give up Netflix, overseas holidays, gym memberships and your daily latte. These are not my words, but those of TV property expert Kirsty Allsop, who, and I quote, feels enraged when young people say they can't afford a home. Now, Kirsty, the daughter of a baron, bought her first property with family help at the age of 21, when the average house price in the UK was about £51,000. That's equivalent to £112,000 in today's money. Well, the average home does now actually cost almost £256,000, so more than twice as much as it did when Kirsty bought her first home. So you'd need to forgo Netflix, Starbucks, gym membership and other discretionary spending worth a few £100 a year each year, literally for decades, to be in with a shot of buying a house.
So the fact is that, yes, a couple of people are able to get, you know, they're lucky and they work hard, and through a combination of both, they are able to get their foot on the property ladder. A lot of the time it includes examples like Kirsty, who are able to be either live with parents and or get money from their parents to save up for that deposit. I think we should be aiming a bit higher than the bare minimum of a few people can own a home, and we should actually aim for everyone to be able to own a high quality, affordable home where they want to live and work. And they shouldn't have to give up Netflix or EasyJet holidays for a savings of a couple of £100 a year just to do that.
Now, that was Freddie Poser. He is from the campaign group Priced Out, a group of young people for whom I have a lot of respect. So, because they're campaigning for house prices to be more realistic. Even young housing market campaigners like Freddie with good educations and great prospects are saying that Kirsty Allsop, with all respect, isn't living in the real world. Now, since her interview appeared in the Times over the weekend, She has said everyone knows that journalists often twist the truth beyond recognition. If a news story plays into our own prejudices, then we take it as gospel. Well, not everybody, Kirsty. I don't think that. I certainly don't do that. But anyway. But let's have a debate. That's what we do here on The Money. It's friend of the show and property expert, Russell Quirk. Russell, good to see you. Now, I've got you on deliberately today because you and I so often disagree, don't we, on house issues. I've said, and I've written about this for many years, there's a fundamental shortage of homes being built in the UK. I think that's because the big property developers are far too influential and deliberately restrict supply. You, with your expertise, take a different view, and hats off to you for that. It's what makes the world go round, having different opinions while swapping them amicably. And we disagree, don't we, on this latest intervention by Kirsty Allsop?
Yeah, look, I do think Kirsty has a point, and I know she's been roundly castigated today, particularly on social media and by the kind of the newspaper and broadcast media for what she said. And look, it's undoubtedly not true that just giving up Netflix and a few lattes magically allows you to buy a 2-bedroom house in Camberwell. That's clearly not true. I think the point she's trying to make, though, and that I've made, and you and I have rehearsed, actually, Liam, in recent weeks and previous encounters, that we hear a lot of anecdotal stuff, a lot of rhetoric around how hard it is for first-time buyers to get on the first rung of the property ladder. And actually, my argument, and I guess shared by Kirsty Allsop, is that generally, actually, that's not true. And rather than using anecdotal kind of verbiage, there is some evidence, there's data, there's statistics that back that up. So, for instance, I'll throw one at you, which is that in 2021, there were 408,000 first-time buyers. So people buying a home for the first time, which was double that of 2008, 2009. The amount of transactions now that include first-time buyers as the purchaser is now 30% of all transactions. So rather than this perception that is peddled that first-time buyers simply can't buy a property, the data, the actual statistics show us that first-time buyers as a percentage of all homes, and bearing in mind transaction levels are high, they were higher last year than they've ever been, first-time buyers somehow are managing to buy homes despite the rhetoric.
Good points, Russell. Well made. I'd say to you that by using a comparison of transactions now and comparing it with 2008-9, you're deliberately using a year where housing transactions collapsed because of the global financial crisis. I'd also cite numbers that are implicit in the numbers that I said at the top of this discussion, that when Kirsty Allsop bought her first property, and I bought my first property, by the way, in the mid-90s, the average home in the UK cost about 3 to 4 times average earnings. The average home in the UK now costs 8 to 9 times average earnings, which means it's impossible to get a mortgage without a massive, massive deposit, even if you're 2 people getting a mortgage for 3 times your income. And here's the clincher. Half of all first-time buyers, rising to 2/3 in London and the South East, rely on the bank of mum and dad. Now, if you've made money and you want to give some money to your kids, chapeau. That's what life is about. But the housing market should be a source of social mobility where anyone that works hard and saves hard can get on that housing ladder and free themselves from becoming someone else's tenant and paying someone else's mortgage. That is now not happening. So our housing market, instead of being a source of social mobility as it was in the post-war years, up to and including the beginning of my adult life, is now a source of social immobility, rancour and resentment.
Yeah, so to say that you have to come up with a substantial deposit, again, is not true. And actually, the only societies I know where you're kind of given a property so that, you know, to your point and also Freddie's point earlier on, everybody should be able to buy a home. Well, what you're suggesting then is someone that is part-time on £10,000 a year should be able to buy a home and therefore presumably it be subsidised by the taxpayer or by the government. The only societies that I know that do that, actually, my father-in-law, who's from Slovakia or Czechoslovakia as it was, you know, he recalls fondly in the 1970s and 1980s when he and all of his workers were given a property to live in. That's what they used to call communism. not something that I hope that we see on our shores anytime soon. And look, the point around first-time buyers struggling is entirely mitigated, first of all, by one major factor. So my silver bullet, back to you, Liam, is the fact that interest rates now, bearing in mind you can today get a 95% mortgage, so that's a 5% deposit, which is about £12,500 on the average home, at barely 3%. And actually that 3% fixed rate is even lower than it was in November just last year. So actually fixed rate mortgage rates are reducing. So the cost of servicing a loan is about 10 times less than it was 10, 12, 15, 20, 30 years ago. But what we also have is the fact that first-time buyers don't pay stamp duty anymore like they used to when I and you bought our properties. There is the Bank of Mum and Dad, which has so far lent about £55 billion and therefore helped people get onto the first rung of the property ladder. And we have Boris mortgages. And we have Help to Buy. So I think my point and Kirsty's point is that lamenting first-time buyers as if, it's impossible to get on the first rung of the property ladder, it's simply by way of what I've just said and all of that help, all of that assistance and the evidence and the data, it simply isn't true.
Russell, I've given you a good run for your money. I just want to come back on one or two of those points very, very briefly before we move on to emails, and I really appreciate you coming on the show. When houses were giving away in Czechoslovakia, as was Russia, I was somebody who lived in the post-communist world. That wasn't communism. That was actually the end of communism. That's how they ended communism and entrenched private sector property rights by giving people their homes. So I'd very much contest you on that. I'm not saying taxpayers should subsidise home buyers. I'm saying we should build more homes so the price of homes isn't such a massive multiple of our average wages. And I maintain that our big developers are deliberately restricting supply. You said there's the Bank of Mum and Dad. Well, for most people there isn't, by the way, and they really resent that. And then you also mentioned Help to Buy. Well, under Help to Buy, the big property developers who have massively benefited from that have actually built fewer homes than they were before that massive government subsidy. Russell, we need to move on, but you're going to come back and we're going to talk about this more. And who knows, maybe even Kirsty Allsop herself will come and have a chat with some people who really know their stuff about the property market. People like me, people like Russell Quirk. Russell, thanks a lot. And Kirsty Allsop, you're always welcome on my show. I hope you think this was a fair discussion. Get in touch and let me know. Lots of you on topics discussed today. Scrapping green subsidies to cut household bills. Christine says, in my book, if bills are likely to increase by 100%, then the government's in line to make a 100% increase in the tax take from this green levy. Good point. Gary says, yes, we should scrap the green parts of all our bills, as this is what I would call a national emergency. But to keep the eco-warriors happy, it should be reviewed every 12 months. And on Kirsty Allsop's comments, very mixed from our GB News viewers. Stuart says, I'm fed up with wealthy, privileged and out-of-touch people trying to tell us ordinary folk how to live. We don't all have wealthy parents and she needs to keep quiet. Quite rude, but fair enough, I guess. And Judith says, yes, Kirsty Allsop is right. We all have choices in life. A lot of students who are probably 21 when leaving university have a gap year instead of finding work. Then they moan they're unable to pay for a mortgage. Nothing in life is free and we all need to work to be able to pay our way. And finally, Pete, why can't we extend mortgage lifetimes to 40 years, people working longer? This will bring down payments for young people. Indeed, that's what they do in Japan, 100-year mortgages going over several generations. Thanks to everybody who's written in today. This debate will continue here on The Money. Now, time for my daily interview series, Money Talks. And our guest today is Stephen Morley, an expert in automation whose 40-year career has seen him studying manufacturing processes across Europe, Japan and China. His current role is president of the Confederation of British Metal Forming, a trade association focused on supporting manufacturing companies, predominantly those in the automotive and aerospace industries. Stephen recently met with Secretary of State for Business, Kwasi Kwarteng, to discuss how government policy is affecting manufacturing companies on a daily basis. And here to tell us, we're joined in the studio by Stephen Morley, my latest guest on Money Talks. Stephen, great to have you in the studio. Here on The Money, we don't just talk about financial issues and markets and government policy. We talk about real-life industry, metal bashing and all the things that Britain is. We are still a world-class manufacturer, aren't we? We're still 8th, 9th in the world in manufacturing.
Should be higher.
What's your vision for UK manufacturing? Before I come on to what you wrote to Kwasi Kwarteng, which you've helpfully published, what's your vision?
I think we are optimistic of the future. I think we've just recently done a survey, and 74% of our members are optimistic of where we can get to, and so that's a bright future ahead. Obviously my concern is in the short term of how we get to that bright future.
Now, you wrote to Kwasi Kwarteng, who I've generally found to be, he's across his brief. He really. Some business secretaries, they come and go, but I think in fairness to him, he has really got his arms around this brief, and a lot of people speak quite highly of him. But you had some particular concerns, didn't you? Not least relating to energy costs. Of course, there's no energy price cap for companies. A lot of manufacturers, they're very, very intensive users of energy. You don't have a price cap, and you're saying that the tariffs are increasing in some cases by 100% or even more, with energy providers asking your members, big manufacturers, and even medium and small-sized manufacturers for multi-thousand-pound deposits just to keep their energy supply going.
That's correct. On electricity, we're seeing 100% average increases, so highest I've seen is 140%. On gas, we're seeing quadruple increases, so 400%. So the cost of manufacturing is going for the roof. When the time when we need stability, we've got, coming out of the pandemic and Brexit, we've got a lot of debt, C bills, B bills. So companies have took this debt on.
They're the continuity business loans.
Yeah, continuity business loans, B bills loans, and they took time to pay from HMRC. Last October, the payback of the bills, HMRC repayments all came back together. So companies are struggling already. And then on top of that, you've got the things you mentioned in your show about supply delays, cost of supplies, freight costs, the insurance increase to come. And then the energy bills on top will send some companies to the wall. And we're already seeing record insolvencies, 44% of companies, who are close to insolvency. So there's a high ratio that we need to protect. And my concern with Kwasi Kwarteng, as you say, is very educated and pro-manufacturing, which is good to hear, is that we need support now. We need short-term support to get to the bright future that he's investing in.
Cash flow, right? Cash flow.
Cash flow's king.
It's what kills businesses.
Cash flow's king.
Cash flow.
That's absolutely spot on.
Run out of cash, business collapses.
That's exactly spot
Even if it's a great business?
Even if it's a great business. Many businesses have failed because cash flow is absolutely paramount to their success.
Let's talk a little bit about the extent to which energy looms large for your members. Now, if you run a pub or a restaurant, a leisure centre, energy bills are important, but for manufacturers, they're really important. And also, labour costs are really important. Skilled workers, you've got 100, 150% increase in your energy bills, possibly with more to come. And then you've got a tax on workers for employers in the form of these national insurance increases coming in April as well. What are the implications on the ground for British manufacturers of that double whammy?
I think we're pretty proud in saying we're at the coal face of manufacturing. So we talk to MDs on a weekly basis, and they're worried. They're very worried about where they're going to get to. They didn't think they'd get through the pandemic. Brexit has brought extra things like still safeguarding where they're paying. Some companies are paying tariffs and tax that you may not be aware of from our government on importing steel from the EU, which is not taxed before.
Yeah.
So 7 or 8 of them companies have been threatened by that. The labour increase will come because the inflation is going up.
Yeah. So wages go up,
wages go
and
up,
then the national insurance cost, as a function of those wages, goes up.
We're seeing, we've done the survey recently, the highest increase we've seen so far is 6%. But inflation then was 3 or 4%.
Yeah, now it's going to be 6 or 7% headline. We're going to get double-digit wage rises, aren't we?
We're going to get double-digit inflation.
Industrial action, do you think?
I hope not, because we've got enough problems as it is.
We were kids in the 70s, right? We remember what it was like.
Horrendous. And even in the recession of the 80s, I remember them dark days. I think we don't want to go back there. We have plenty to be optimistic about, but we need short-term support to get to them bright future. British Volt, massive investment from the government. The gigafactories, hopefully get one in Coventry.
Building those batteries for those electric cars.
But you need to get there.
You need to get there.
It's all down the road. Even the energy, nuclear energy, too far away.
Great to have you on the show. Final words. You get in an elevator with Boris Johnson. Not that there are lifts in Downing Street, but who knows?
Who knows?
What do you say to him? You've got 10 seconds.
Support manufacturing. Don't see it as when it's good, you want to be on the bus. When it's not, then walk away from it. Have a manufacturing strategy that's good for all manufacturing to take us forward. Just don't pick it up when it suits you.
Stephen Morley, you are of the Confederation of British Manufacturers. We're huge supporters of manufacturing here on The Money. You're always welcome on the show, and thanks very much for coming in today. Stephen Morley there. That's all we got time for today here on The Money. Thanks for joining me. We'll be back for more economics, business and consumer news at 1 p.m. tomorrow. You lucky people on GB News Television and DAB Plus Radio. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and that was On The Money.
Hello again. Following a bright start to the day, it is now turning cloudier from the west, and that cloud will bring rain in some western and northwestern parts during the rest of the day. It will also turn increasingly windy in the far north and northwest, where persistent and at times heavy rain will affect the far north. Now, for much of Scotland, Northern Ireland, Western England and Wales, it's a cloudy afternoon with the cloud covering the hills, and it's going to be damp, especially over hills and coasts, with mostly light rain and drizzle. But further east, well, it stays bright, albeit increasingly cloudy. 8 Celsius in the east of England, I think 12 or 13 across western parts of the UK. And overnight, the rain turns heavy as it sinks south across Scotland, pushing into the central belt and southern Scotland by midnight, as well as Northern Ireland and then eventually northern England. It clears from the north of